In Module 4, we will discuss the Middle Ages, a period of time from roughly 400 to 1400 AD. During the Middle Ages, the institutions and structures that make up human civilization as we know it matured into forms that we recognize today. Nations, governments, religious denominations, and systems of production and trade took on a defined but certainly not static form. The Middle Ages were perhaps the time in which civilizations began considering themselves as part of a greater world that extended across the globe, rather than simply within the confines of their boundaries and those of their immediate neighbors. Accordingly, by the close of the Middle Ages, adventurers and empire builders were looking across great distances of sea and land to other continents. The Middle Ages began in earnest with the conquest of Rome in the 5th century and its subsequent rule by Germanic peoples. It can be argued that the addition of Germanic cultures into the former Roman Empire sowed the seeds of modern Western Europe. Germanics introduced the kingdom system and a rural rather than urban economy of production. This was also the time in which Catholic Christianity took on the familiar form of today based on monastery and parish. These developments made better use and control of the sprawling lands of Europe than the old Roman urban system. The greatest leader of the Middle Ages was Charles the Great, better known as Charlemagne. He was crowned Emperor of the Holy Roman Empire by Pope Leo III in 800, an act which not only firmly established Charlemagne's legitimacy and authority over Christians everywhere, but also cemented the union between the church and civil government, an arrangement that would come to define faith and politics for centuries to come, and it still exists on a less formal basis today. Charlemagne undertook a new emphasis on education and scholarship within the empire, and introduced a new form of writing called Carolinian minuscule, which was easy to learn and legible. This Carolinian Renaissance, as it has been called, was intended to produce a more learned and qualified clergy, but its effects were apparent on scholarship, government, and commerce as well. The Central and later Middle Ages, roughly 1000 to 1400 AD, would see population growth and a return to urban life which had been in decline since the end of the Roman Empire. New technology and techniques in agriculture, manufacturing, and transportation led to dramatically increased commerce. As agricultural yields increased, more people could do other kinds of work, and a burgeoning consumer class emerged. European art reached its zenith at this time, with amazing pieces from names such as Michelangelo and Rembrandt, which are still known, well, and respected today. Christianity assumed a mature, institutionalized form during the mid and late medieval period. The Catholic Church, by this time, was a source of both religious and governmental authority. No European monarch could be successful without the aid and approval of the Pope. The Church enacted the Crusades, a series of ultimately unsuccessful attempts to conquer the Holy Lands of the Middle East. The Church also sold favors of all sorts, particularly indulgences, and many of its officials lived opulent lives. There were positive developments as well. In the 1100s and 1200s, many important monastic orders were founded, particularly the Benedictines and the Franciscans. Monasteries in the late medieval period were important centers for science, education, and invention. The Franciscans in particular established the model for Christian charity to poor and ill people, which they carry on today. The Middle Ages also gave rise to what you are presently engaged in, the modern system of college and university education. In the early Middle Ages, education outside of trades was the province of clergy. Later in the Middle Ages, the increasing urbanization of life and the need for skilled administrators in business and government led to the rise of modern college and university system. Schools spread beyond the walls of the rural monastery into the parishes of towns and cities. In France and northern Italy, independent schools for teaching philosophy and science came about. Organizations called universitas came about, created by masters of parochial schools who had been licensed to teach. In the later Middle Ages, modern universities would be created which are still standing today, such as Oxford and Cambridge in England and the University of Paris in France. In the late Middle Ages, literature assumed its place of prominence in the Western world. Increasing literacy and more leisure time created a demand for books, which was met by a burgeoning publishing industry. Additionally, more and more works were being written in modern languages instead of Latin, which gave them a much broader appeal. Italy and England, in particular, held many talented authors and playwrights. Geoffrey Chaucer's Canterbury Tales and Dante's Divine Comedy are still used as foundational subject matter in any course on modern literature. The Catholic Church still maintained tight control over the Bible and continued to only print it in Latin and restrict its reading to clergy. However, a series of reformers, including John Wycliffe and William Tyndale, challenged the Church's monopoly on the Scriptures, and aided by the 1448 invention of the modern printing press and the rapidly growing Protestant Reformation, steadily eroded the separation between lay people and Scripture. Many of these early reformers paid with their lives to bring the words of the Bible to common people. It is safe to suggest that more Christian martyrs were produced in the Middle Ages by the Catholic Church and its various state allies than by all other conflicts with other religions throughout history. Perhaps the most enduring contribution of the Middle Ages to posterity is the advancement of science. It was in the last few centuries before the modern period that science was slowly extricated from its origins in philosophy, religion, and magic. German scientist Nicholas Copernicus established the heliocentric model of the solar system, where Earth and other planets orbit the Sun, which he published as On the Revolutions of Celestial Spheres. The Italian astronomer Galileo championed Copernicus's work and discovered the 4 largest moons of Jupiter.